right, it has just ticked over to 10 o'clock, so we might get started. So hi everyone, and welcome to our Preventing Childhood Poisonings webinar this morning. So my name is Olivia and I am one of our project officers here at Kidsafe WA. And we are also joined by our guest speaker, Pooja, who is a Poisons Information Specialist at the WA Poisons Information Centre. So thank you to everyone for registering, whether you are joining us live or you are watching via our recording. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. So our webinar will, run for approximately 40 to 45 minutes this morning. So if you do have any questions, please leave them in the question and answer little box, and we can answer them all together at the end. I would firstly like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we are meeting on today. So we are recording from the Kidsafe WA head office, which is in West Leederville, which is the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging across Western Australia and from where you are listening in from today. So we are currently in the last few days of the Noongar season of Canberra, before we move into the new season of Barak. So Barak is the first summer or season of the young. So I'm sure no one's surprised by this, but we're starting to see some of that warmer weather coming through, with our afternoons still slightly cooled by some of those sea breezes. And just an overview of today's webinar. So to start off with, we'll just have a quick overview of who is Kidsafe WA, what are we about, and what are some things that we do. And then we will have a look at some poisoning injury statistics in Western Australia, followed by common childhood poisonings with Pooja from the WA Poisons Information Centre. And lastly, as I said, we'll go through some of the questions if anyone has any, and we'll answer those at the end. So who is Kidsafe? Hopefully you guys have heard of us before, but for those who this is your first interaction with Kidsafe WA, we are the leading not-for-profit organisation dedicated to promoting safety and preventing childhood injuries and accidents in Western Australia. So we do this through education, advocacy and research as well. And why does Kidsafe WA exist? So we know that injuries are the leading cause of death amongst Australian children, and we know that more children die from injury than from cancer, asthma and infectious diseases combined. So many of the deaths and injuries we do see are preventable, which is a really good sign. And there's lots that we can be doing as parents, educators, carers, to reduce the risk of those, quite serious injuries. Just to give you an idea of how many injuries we are seeing across Western Australia. So every year we see roughly 35,000 children present to Perth Children's Hospital Emergency Department with an injury. Roughly 8,000 are admitted, and we see roughly 23 deaths from an injury, which, is quite significant. So the majority of children we do see that are presenting to the hospital are sort of in that 0 to 5 age group, which is sort of our priority target area that we're looking at. So in this age group, children are developing, those physical abilities to move around, they're starting to become more mobile, and they can access, a lot of different parts of their surroundings. However, they aren't always able to assess the hazards or risks correctly, and can get themselves into tricky situations and don't have the skills to sort of remove themselves where necessary. So this is why it's really important for us as parents, carers, educators to be able to provide that really nice and safe environment for them. And again, just a little overview of where we are seeing most of the injuries. So most of the injuries we are seeing for little ones in that 0 to 5 age group is in the home area. This may not be a big surprise to most of you, but majority of injuries that we are seeing in the home is sort of because we know kids in that age group do spend a lot of time at home. And then as they get a little bit older and they start going to school, we do see a lot of injuries in sort of the school and the sporting, recreational and cultural areas as well. Lastly, just to show you some injury statistics that we are sort of seeing across Western Australia. So this information has been taken from one of our research reports, which was focusing on poison-related injuries. So this report looked at all the injury presentations to Perth Children's Hospital for children aged between 0 and 15 that happened across the years from 2012 to 2017. So this gives us a really good indication of, some of the poison-related injuries that did occur during that period. So over that period, we had 2,301 poison injury presentations to Perth Children's Hospital Emergency Department, with most of those accidental poisonings occurring in children less than 5 years of age. So that's, within that priority area that we talked about before. And over half of poisoning presentations in children were from pharmaceuticals. So particularly paracetamol was one of the main poisonings that we were seeing there. And as I said, we do know that children, age 1 to 3 are most at risk of those poisonings. So this data indicates that poison-related injuries are accounting for a pretty significant proportion of presentations to Perth Children's Hospital. And we will discuss later on ways that we can prevent poisonings in our home, or even in an education setting as well. So we do have a quick little animation that I will play that goes over some important poison safety tips.
Kids are so curious and adventurous. They love tasting and eating anything they can find, which explains why hundreds of children under 5 need medical treatment for poisoning every year. You might be surprised, though, at the most common poison risk. It's paracetamol. Yeah, the common headache and pain relief tablets. Now, in fact, all medications are very dangerous for children, so always keep tablets in their original packaging and store them somewhere high and away. Rule 1, always keep medications out of reach. Particularly risky are grandma or granddad's prescription medications. They look just like lollies to small children, so make sure they're kept out of harm's way. Another serious risk to children is button batteries. Now, if swallowed, these batteries can get stuck in a child's throat and burn badly. Now, these batteries are in small remote controls, singing greeting cards, and those novelty flashing or singing hats, that sort of thing. So, rule 2, be battery aware and keep these items out of reach if you're not there to supervise play. Inside the home, cleaning products are a big poison risk. Never leave bottles or containers out, including dishwashing machine tablets. And always keep poisons in their original labelled containers to avoid mix-ups. If you do need to store them under a kitchen or laundry sink, install child-resistant locks. But keeping them high and out of reach is best. Rule 3, lock poisons up and away. Outside, be aware of fertilisers, pesticides, pool chemicals, and other poison risks. They should all be locked away in a shed or in a secure garage cabinet, because poisons outside should be locked out of sight. Now, if the unthinkable should happen and your child has swallowed something, call the Poisons Information Line on 13 11 26. They're available 24/7 and they can provide expert help with child, adult or pet poisonings. Don't induce vomiting unless you're told to do so. If they've swallowed something caustic like bleach, vomiting will burn on the way back up too. Remember, prevention is the best cure we have. Always look out for poisoning hazards and keep your kids safe. For more information, visit kidsafewa.com.au.
All right, so just following on from that short animation there. So I just wanted to briefly touch on button batteries and magnets. So we know that unfortunately 20 children present to an emergency department for a button battery ingestion every week. So button batteries are those small coin-shaped batteries that can be found in quite a few household items. Things such as remotes, scales, car key fobs, remote controls, those singing greeting cards that were mentioned in the video, and also hearing aids. So babies and toddlers, we know that they are at quite a significant risk of button battery related injuries. As they, become more mobile, they really do learn by putting things in their mouth and having a feel around. So we really just want to make sure we're preventing any serious injuries there. And many parents may be unaware of the dangers of button batteries, and the symptoms of swallowing a button battery can be quite similar to, some other illnesses. So if ingested by a small child, button batteries can become stuck in their throat and start to burn through their esophagus in less than 2 hours, which can obviously, cause some really serious life-threatening injuries or, even death. So we do have an image here of some small high-powered magnets as well in the bottom right-hand side of the screen there. So these magnets are really small and they are, highly powerful and can pose a really serious risk if swallowed. So what tends to happen is once the magnets are swallowed, they tend to sort of draw together in the stomach. And again, that can produce a really serious injury. So just making sure if you do have any magnets or button batteries in your home, making sure they are, secured in devices. So we do recommend identifying devices around your home that may contain a button battery or a magnet. So as I said before, things like remotes, scales, toys, key fobs, those sorts of things. And just ensuring those compartments on those items are nice and secure. So, perhaps if it's on the back of a remote, you can secure the back of the remote and put it up in an area nice and high where a child can't reach. And we also suggest things with the small magnets. So moving into Christmas time, a lot of people may be gifting those reusable water balloons as a Christmas gift. And what happens is there's small magnets around the edge that enclose that small water balloon. And what we are seeing is, they're not secured properly and they can become loose. So we really just want to be aware of those sorts of things as we are moving into the Christmas and sort of toy gifting period as well. And lastly, just making sure we are disposing of any batteries at a battery recycling collection point. So I know at my local Woolworths and Officeworks, they've got sort of those cardboard bins there. So I highly suggest just having a little look next time you are in those sorts of shops and taking your batteries and disposing of them correctly. So now I will pass along to Pooja to speak about some common childhood poisons as well.
You for having me. I'm Pooja. I'm one of the Poisons Information Pharmacists that works at the WA Poisons Information Centre. I don't think I can. Perfect. So the WA Poisons Information Centre is an emergency phone service that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In Australia, we actually have 5 Poisons Information Centres. 4 of them are for humans, and WA covers the 3 states. So it covers South Australia, WA, and Northern Territory. And then we have other poison centres in Queensland, Victoria, and New South Wales. We are specialists that have had additional training as pharmacists, and we handle cases where we've had people are exposed to either pharmaceuticals, veterinary medicines, common household products, pesticides, plants and mushrooms, and also bites and stings. So just to touch base, fifth poison centre that we have in Australia is actually the Australian Animal Poisons Helpline. They will handle calls related to animal poisonings. We definitely recommend to call them because we are not, unfortunately, trained in giving advice in these cases. So each year in Australia, we have thousands of children that require medical attention following a poisoning. Most poisonings actually occur in children that are under 5 years old, with kids being 1 to 3 years being most at risk. It's because toddlers are really inquisitive, they're highly mobile, and they will tend to put things into their mouths. So looking at the statistics that we've had at the W Poison Centre in 2022, 50% of all cases that we've taken are actually in toddlers that are 1 to 4 years old. And sorry, 33% were in kids 1 to 4 years old. And the most common exposure was usually pharmaceuticals. So they take 40% of the calls we get, but that's closely followed by household cleaning products, which come at 14%. Plants, we usually get called about 13% of the time. And then we have cosmetics and pesticides that are at the 10% and 6%. So we're just going to look at some of the calls that we get very often. So these are the top 7 topics that we get called about. So we're looking at pharmaceuticals, dishwashing tablets, laundry pods, toilet blocks, hand sanitizers, nicotine, essential oil, and plant exposures as well. So our first topic is pharmaceuticals, and we're going to look at the most common pharmaceuticals that we get called about. So the first thing that we get very often is paracetamol and ibuprofen. They are actually our most common phone calls that we get at the WA Poison Centre. Fortunately, most of these Panadol ibuprofen exposures are low risk, and it's very uncommon for a child to ingest a toxic dose. But we still have had cases where children have had access to the bottles and ingested large unknown amounts, and they can actually be quite a high risk of significant toxicity. The main concern we have with these ones is they can cause permanent damage to the liver and kidneys. So it's always important to give us a call when you have an exposure to them. Next thing that we get is multivitamin gummies. These are extremely appealing to young children because they look, taste exactly like lollies. Large ingestions are generally relatively low risk, so they most commonly just cause a bit of an upset stomach. But we do get concerned because some of them are formulated with ingredients like iron, which can potentially be at risk for multi-organ failure and things like that. Melatonin, that's become a massive one, especially in the last couple of years. So the products that you can find online, they are these chewable tablets or gummies, and again, are extremely palatable and they're available in large pack sizes. There's not a lot of data available on what happens with these melatonin overdoses, but we have had cases where when we've had large ingestions, they've actually affected the brain and the heart and the blood pressure and things like that. So it's always good to double check that one. Clonidine and guanfacine, these are prescription medications. They're commonly prescribed in kids with ADHD. We've seen a massive increase in these calls in the last couple of years, and they have a very low margin of safety, and they are associated with very high risk of toxicity. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of calls from hospitals where kids have become comatose or their blood pressure, heart rate have basically plummeted following ingestions of these, and it can even just be a couple of tablets that can cause these effects. So medication safety around the home is really important. First thing is don't call medications lollies around kids. I know it can be sometimes difficult for them to take the medications, and this is commonly used as a trick to get them to take it. But some medications, they can be quite appealing to young children. They're brightly coloured, they're fruity flavours, they have a lolly-like appearance, and that can potentially be quite dangerous. Don't take medications in front of children. As you guys know, kids commonly will try to copy or mimic what they see happening around the house. So if they're witnessing parents or grandparents taking medications, they are more likely to have an accident or exposure following. Store medications away from areas that kids can access. So this means installing child-resistant mechanisms on doors where medicines are stored. We commonly tell parents to actually get down onto their hands and knees, because if they can reach it, their kids will be able to reach it as well. A big thing we get, especially during the night, is medication errors because they've not read the label or they've not checked the bottle and they've commonly been given something else instead. So always make sure you turn the light on, check the label before you give anything to your kids. Return expired medications or ones that you no longer need. Medications around the house are a risk. If you don't need them, get rid of them, basically. Always tightly close and put away medication straight after use. Kids are notorious. Once you've dosed them with Panadol and Nurofen and you've just left the bottle lying around, they'll commonly get the bottle, and we have had cases where they've ingested an entire bottle following. Next thing we're looking at is dishwashing tablets and laundry pods. So they're the ones that we're putting into the machine, putting into laundry to clean all of these products. They can be very attractive to kids due to their bright colours. I know especially when I started, it seemed like every second call was about a kid that had ingested some part of these. Minor exposures are very common, and they usually only cause irritation to the stomach, so it can cause a bit of nausea and vomiting. But the main concern we have is if they've ingested a large amount of it or a big proportion of it, they have strong detergents and they can cause like an ulcer or a burn in the stomach. Kids following these exposures are very unsettled. We can see that they're drooling, vomiting persistently, and they will need to be assessed at the hospital. We get quite burns or ulcers in the surface or on the surface of their eye following an exposure. The risk is really based on the amount ingested and the ingredients found in the product. There's such a wide range. So usually the best thing to do is just give us a call. We have a database where we can check what's in these products and make a risk assessment according to exposure. Toilet blocks. So they're the things that we're sticking in the toilets, hanging in the cages. And again, very common exposure we have. They are highly attractive to kids because they're very brightly coloured. So we're looking at like those gel discs. Those are our most common ones. So they're the fresh discs and the LD Power Force discs. We actually had a conversation with one of the New South Wales Poisonings Information Centres, and they were looking into getting those discs to be clear because we thought that that might reduce the amount of exposures we might see from them. Again, most of these ingestions are relatively low risk. They have mild detergents in them. So again, they can cause a bit of nausea and vomiting, but there are some products that contain a bleaching agent and they can again cause burns and ulcers. Generally after these exposures, we would all recommend to take a damp cloth and just give a rinse of the mouth just to get rid of any residue. We recommend not to give anything to eat or drink before contacting us so that we can give you advice in this case. Instant hand sanitizers, again, massive thing that's happened after COVID. So we've looked at the data at the Poison Centre between 2017 and 2022 in children, and we've seen that the cases have more than doubled since COVID. So it's a big amount. So we're seeing at least 300 to 400 calls per year of ingestions in kids. 99% of these exposures occur in the house, and 6% usually happen in schools or in an educational establishment. So majority of these hand sanitizers, they contain ethanol, and it's usually in a very high percentage. So they range from 60 to 80%. 80% of calls that we've had at the Poisons Information Centre between 2017 and 2022 have been in kids, and 60% of all cases are toddlers. Children are more susceptible to the effects of these ones because they basically don't have any tolerance to alcohol. Fortunately, majority of the ingestions are usually a lick or a taste, but some hand sanitizers, they're fragrance with fruit, and we have had cases where children have ingested large amounts and it's resulted in a severe poisoning. The main concern we have with these ones is kids can get quite intoxicated, and they can also get a large drop in their blood sugar, which can be quite dangerous. Again, our recommendations are give their mouth a bit of a wipe and contact us as soon as you've noticed that this has happened. Nicotine. In the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in the number of cases of nicotine exposures, and it's because they've had more access to products like vapes and inhalers. Nicotine is highly toxic. It's rapidly absorbed through all routes, so mouth, skin, things like that, and kids are really sensitive to the toxic effects. We have some e-cigarettes that are nicotine free, but we've had a look at a recent study where they actually looked at 10 e-cigarettes that are marketed as nicotine free, and they've actually found that 60% of them still contain nicotine. And we also have other ones that contain a very high concentration, so up to 100 milligram per mil. And when it's ingested, even if it splashes on the skin, these devices usually will contain enough nicotine to cause severe poisoning in kids. Main things we get concerned about with these ones is they can affect the heart, so we see large drops in blood pressure and heart rate, and they also have potential risk of seizures, and these usually will happen very quickly after exposure, so it's really important if they've been exposed to it to call us straight away. They are also very attractive to your kids because they're commonly available in a wide range of sweet flavours. We get bubblegum, strawberry, watermelon, and they're all highly palatable. In 2022 itself, we saw that the e-cigarette exposures have increased by 40%, and most concerningly, it's increased by up to 124% in toddlers. From 2017 to 2022, we've seen that case numbers have increased them more than 3 times. Essential oils. These are, again, a very common exposure that we get. So essential oils are commonly used for their medicinal uses. They're used as aromatic cleaning agents, things like that. And common essential oil calls that we get lavender oil, tea tree oil, peppermint oil, and we get calls about eucalyptus oil and clove oil as well. These ones are definitely very concerning. Even small ingestions of concentrated oils can cause significant toxicity, and usually these symptoms are quite rapid and we can see them within an hour of the ingestion. The main concern we have is they can make kids extremely drowsy, and they can get seizures as well following small ingestions. Some additional oils have additional concerns and they have a much lower threshold where we will refer it. So, for example, any ingestion of a concentrated clove oil is very dangerous. It can cause liver damage. Eucalyptus oil, again, has a much lower threshold of toxicity and is associated with high risk of seizures. Oil of wintergreen is something that we get called about as well, and that can cause what we call a salicylate poisoning, which you see commonly after kids ingest large amounts of aspirin as well. Often these essential oils are in small amounts in perfumes and air fresheners, and generally it's not the essential oil that we're concerned about in these cases, but the vehicle therein can commonly be a toxic alcohol, like ethylene glycol or a glycol-based ether that can cause severe poisoning as well. Plants are a big call that we get, and we're just going to have a look at some of the common plants that we get called about. The biggest call we get are from what we call the family Eraceae, so they're your Swiss cheese, your elephant ear, your peace lily plants, and they are more commonly found inside the home. They actually contain these microscopic needle-like structures, which are called insoluble oxalates. And when kids chew, bite, ingest, it basically gets embedded inside the mouth, on the tongue, and they cause an immediate burning sensation. Usually these ones don't cause any systemic poisoning, but we will commonly get calls where you can hear kids screaming in the background following exposure because it is such a painful experience. So the second one we have is the family Aponaceae. So these include things like your oleander, desert rose, and even frangipani. While some of these plants are generally only associated with mild effects, so usually with frangipani ingestions, they just cause a bit of an irritated stomach. Others are actually known to contain what we call cardiac glycosides. So these are found both in the oleander and desert rose, and even small ingestions can cause life-threatening effects where they basically affect the electrical activity in the heart. The other most common plant we get is with the Solanaceae family. So this includes things like black nightshade, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and the angel's trumpet. Again, many of the plants have toxic effects. So with, for example, the black nightshade, we see quite significant gastro upset. So they can be have quite severe vomiting, diarrhea, and that can be quite delayed. And it can also affect the heart. So we can see cardiac arrhythmias. Brunfelsius, that's your yesterday, today, tomorrow. That's also something we get quite concerned about. They've been associated in animals, at least, with higher risk of causing seizures. And so generally speaking, if you've had a kid that ingests them, please do give us a call. Angel's trumpet as well is something we get called about quite often, and it has a potential risk of causing seizures and arrhythmias. So just some do's and don'ts that we recommend if you've had a exposure or poisoning at home. If you've had something that's followed, immediately rinse out the mouth. If something is inhaled, most important thing is to remove yourself from the exposure, making sure that you're getting plenty of fresh air. If something's in the eye, general advice is usually irrigation. I know this can be really hard, especially with little ones, because it is really irritating to do. We recommend to do 15 minutes at best. I usually find the easiest way to do this is actually getting them in the shower and having the water run through their eyes. Again, they will squirm and struggle because it's not a nice feeling, but it's really important to do this to get rid of anything that's in the eye. If they've got anything on the skin, again, remove any contaminated clothing and make sure you wash the area thoroughly with water. For things that are more oily, we would usually recommend to use something like soap as well, just to get rid of any residue that might be stuck on the skin. Some of the big don'ts, we actually never recommend to induce vomiting anymore. I know about 15, 20 years ago, they used to use something called the syrup of ipecac, and that was something they'd recommend in hospitals to get a kid to vomit. In more recent years, we've basically strayed away from this concept altogether, just because when we do induce vomiting, very commonly we can have the vomit enter the airways, and that can cause respiratory issues. We also do not give charcoal at home. The charcoal tabs and capsules you find at home, they're not formulated in the right way to help with poisonings. And not all poisons will respond to charcoal. Again, they have extremely high risk of entering the airways, and we call that an aspiration, and that can be quite dangerous. So please leave it for the hospital to decide if that needs to be given or not. Do not leave medications out on the benches or counters. This also has to do with household chemicals. If your kids can see it, they will climb, they will reach it, and they will get exposed to it. It's important to never transfer chemicals to another container, especially drink or food containers. It makes it, again, very difficult in these cases for us to get a risk assessment because we don't exactly know what the product is. We've had quite a few calls, especially with pesticides and herbicides that have been transferred to like a water bottle, and kids have ingested it, and we just don't know what the product is, and they usually will end up being sent to the hospital. Don't store any household product medicines near food, so keep them in areas where kids will not commonly go. So don't keep them near the fridge, don't keep them in the pantry, keep them in their own separate places where kids cannot reach them. Again, in all cases, always contact us at the Poisons Information Centre. Again, we are trained to make a very rapid risk assessment, and we can tell you if this is something that we are worried about and will need to be assessed at a hospital, or if they are safe just to be monitored at home. Thanks all for having me today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well.
Awesome, that was great. Thank you so much, Pooja. There's a few more slides we'll go through, and then we can answer some questions at the end. But yeah, thank you again. That was great. Cool. So just to wrap up our webinar this morning, so Kidsafe WA offers a whole range of programs and services. So we have three main program areas. We have our home, road and play areas. So in our home service, we do lots of workshops like this. So we do webinars. I also go out to, child health nurse groups, play groups, schools, those sorts of things, and teach people about safety and injury prevention. And we also have a safety demonstration house at our office in West Leederville. So this is just a gold coin donation to come to. It's, sort of mimics a fake house, and there's lots of different safety tips and locks and all those sorts of things for you guys to look at and have a play around with. But yeah, it's a really, really great service. So if you are ever in West Leederville, please do feel free to come in and have a little look. We also have our road program. So in our road program, we do a lot of child car restraint work. So we offer child car restraint fits, checks, and refits. So if you've already installed it, we can have a little look and fit it around where necessary. And we also have a hiring service. So if you do need to hire a car seat for a short period of time, you can come to us and we can help with that as well. We do offer a whole range of services all over the metro area. So we are in West Leederville. We also have services in Joondalup, in the city of Melville, and we do a mobile service as well. So if you do need us to come out to you, we can offer that. And lastly, we have our playground service. So we do go out to a lot of playgrounds and just making sure that they are complying. We have a whole range of playground workshops as well on topics like nature play. If you're looking to install a nature play sort of area in your centre, we can help with that as well. So to wrap up from our webinar today, just a few things I do suggest going forward. So number one is to save the Poisons information line number to your phone. So that number was 13 11 26. It is such a great service, and I always promote the service when I do go out to my parent workshops. So yeah, I highly recommend just having that saved somewhere, and even passing the number along to any grandparents, friends, anyone like that that may be looking after your child. Yeah, it's just a really great number to have saved. We also recommend having a little look on our website. We do have a whole bunch of resources there. We've got fact sheets on a whole bunch of different things, brochures, those sorts of things. So yeah, definitely jump on and have a little look. And also doing an audit of your home and workplace and just ensuring any poisons are kept up and away in a locked cupboard. So following on from what Pooja said, even getting down on all fours and having a little crawl around your home. It may sound silly, but it is a really great way of being able to see things that you may not have seen before or not be able to see when you're standing up. So yeah, we highly recommend doing that as well. And then also following us on Instagram. We've just joined Instagram, so we have a whole bunch of child safety related information there. And any free car seat checking days will also be posted on our Instagram as well. So our upcoming events, as I mentioned, we do have our safety demo house. So if you would like a guided tour, the next one is on the 5th of December. So feel free to give me an email if you would like to come along. And then we also have our baby safety seminar on Saturday, the 20th of January. So this is a really great seminar for any expected parents. So we do offer a child car restraint sort of demonstration with a few car seats as well. And we'll also have a look through the safety demo house. All right, so we might wrap up our webinar here. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to reach out. My email is on the screen here. I will send up a follow-up email with some more information and the webinar recording as well. So if you do want to ask questions, you can just respond to me there. But thank you all again for tuning in, and hopefully we will see you at our next webinar or one of our workshops. Thank you. Bye.